thank you to all of the organizers, all of the presenters. It's been a lot of fun. I've been up since 2 in the morning here. It's now 8 a.m., so I'm hanging in there. But I think Louise will be flipping through my slide for me. So thank you very much. So I'm going to be presenting on an integral ecology of dreams, which I think has potential for medical anthropology and transforming unjust infrastructures, especially important as we navigate future crisis. And I'm going to talk about two key concepts, which I'd like to introduce. The role of dreams in research design as content, method, site of struggle for resolving oppressions, and what Eric Voegelin called pneumopathologies, this term for spiritual disease of political ideologies like fascism, in the dreamscape and waking world. And then consider wider dream exchange networks as a potential threshold for complexity consciousness to emerge in cosmic evolution, which I'll touch on nearer to the end. Next slide, please. So at a glance, I'll be considering how an integral ecology of dreams can facilitate spiritual research, how it offers pathways to more just energy futures through the path offered by the imagery itself. And then I'll end with some speculations about what that says about the universe and our present moment. So the next slide, 4 assumptions I'll be making are one, that dreams are natural phenomena and thus deserving of ecological research. 2, that dreams arise within ecosystems, contain ecosystems, and both affect each other, this idea of reciprocal embeddedness. 3, that there's potential to incubate lucidity and develop spiritual intelligences and other intelligences. And then lastly, that working with dreams personally or socially can help solve complex problems. And there are techniques and approaches that foster adaptation, making it worthwhile for studying evolution. So, in the next slide, to apply dream research to medical anthropology, then, critical medical anthropology, or CMA, as I'll say, identifies the multifaceted conditions in societies contributing to the cause of any disease. It roots disease in the organization of capitalist production and social environment. And then it also sees the social structure as integral to the inner world, and emotions as integral to that social world as well. Next slide, please. Adrian Pine suggests critical anthropology requires locating ourselves within the structures of the power we analyze, including resisting fascism in the field, the academy, and workplace, so as to recognize the logics and practices of neoliberal fascism where we are employed and in our own work as well. And so as a student worker, next slide, please, I sought to do something similar using the university as a unit of analysis. And so following a research project conducting content analysis of extremist movements, dealing with some personal transitions, moving towards my own dissertation work, and dealing with the dumpster fire that is administrative processes, I switched to a content analysis of my own dream journal. I started in some therapy, mapping my own dreamscape while dealing with various issues and setbacks during my time as TA, RA, student worker, and organizer, as I hit these various barriers with regards to getting a dissertation proposal in committee approved due to policies and procedures that disallowed this during a time of larger transitions taking place. And this actually kind of began when I started a study group reading Jung's Black Books, which was quite an experience. So in the next slide, while that can all get quite personal, this was in addition to the sort of wider environmental activism of the local neighborhood on the San Francisco Peninsula coast, which you can see. where I had been surveying next door, seeing what issues were on people's minds, and mapping these issues as well. Next slide, please. Um, and so with CMA as the field and the university as the site, I wanted to touch on integral ecology of dreams as inquiry method. So on the left, you have this image of integral dreaming, this book by Bogzarin and Delorier, which is drawing on systems theory, Aurobindo's psycho-spiritual integration, as well as Ken Wilber's four-quadrant model. And then 3 points I wanted to bring attention to are: one, sleep justice, that sleep is related to, or lack of sleep is related to, early mortality. And that is, breaks down by racial, gender, and class inequities, marginalized groups having more to stress about get worse sleep. And so this being a justice issue then. Two, reciprocal embeddedness, that the close relationship between environment, emotions, images, logics, pragmatics, all of which are feeding into the ecological baseline. And then lastly, feedback cycles, that waking life feeds dream experience, dreams feed waking experience, and these reciprocate. So for those of you who don't know Wilbur, yeah, you can go to the next slide, thanks. He has a four-quadrant model: singular, plural, interior, exterior. And so on the left, you have associated methodologies, but also you have these methods breaking down in dream research, which you can see on the right. And so all of these kind of methods, all of these ways of seeing reality as coming together as the dream is melding them all. But it does help to organize complexity. So in the next slide, the authors offer two phases of the integral dream practice to first help dreamers reflect on and bring out their dream insight before integrating it into the wider world. And so I recommend checking out the process and practices in their book. Next slide. I won't say much about the relationship between language lucidity and the dreamscape here, besides relating the idea from Fariba Bogzarin of how core beliefs influenced by various structures manifest as emotions. These trigger memories, associations, images, which all come together. And so the thought being that by incubating emotions, ideas, statements, intentions, the symbolic changes we make in the dream, helping us scan, intervene in the body-mind, we can use a dream as a laboratory and practice creating with agency, bringing insights into the waking world to do the same. And besides that, I'd recommend McGill-Christ's work on the brain and language, which is great, so I recommend that. Next slide, please. So playing with these various techniques, then, we can illuminate the unconscious, making explicit the implicit, turning ecologically influenced emotional imagery into wisdom lessons for ourselves and words and worlds, the dream extending across the sleep-wake spectrum, so that by remembering, reflecting, and integrating, we can explicate the implicate order. And on the left, you have just different techniques. Next slide, please. So this lets us dream the future, so to speak, and become aware of things we otherwise would not. In the left, the author suggests the possibility of precognition, with events having a retrocausal effect that dreams can pick up. So the claim was that leading up to 9/11, there were, people have dream journals, and there was an increase in frequency of planes and buildings and catastrophes. And so people are picking up on this. While in the right, stakeholders of an organization are able to, through social dreaming, become aware of information they're typically blind to, or is actively hidden from them, or is unknown. And this information causes effects that, again, the dreams pick up on and people work with and can make decisions about. So in the next slide, you'll see these were 45 recurring characters or themes or things in my own dreams following a year and a half or two. The bold ones being the images and themes that were at the beginning, the other ones at the end. And so I'm summarizing these every 3 months or so, and I've got dossiers on all of these. But it's really fascinating because you're essentially bringing these weak connections together, and it triggers insights and epiphanies. So thought I'd throw that there. And in the next slide, you can see an artificial intelligence rendering of my theming of the data near the beginning of this project and later on. In the first, you see what I called sacred ecologies at the end of the world, edge of the world, where you have a wild landscape, a source of delight, right? So this is the Bay Area at the edge of the world here. And over the course of months, this light sort of evolves into something of a divination collective, more aligned to the spiritual needs of the students, set apart from this ivory tower, the academy, and this alternative infrastructure. Um, you know, Brought together a few diviners were able to offer services, astrology, philosophy, tarot, dream support, able to make up for the limitations of spiritual research that the academy was putting on. And so you can check that out at divinationlab.com or lab or org, I think. The next slide, you can see some of the landscapes adventured through to get there, mountains, oceans, fountains. And then the next slide, the most recent one, you have a bridge, a school, mansion, river, wild landscape, really a place for spiritual research to be done without interference, again, from that neoliberalization of the university. So this gets into my larger sense of what's going on, seeing dream research as a science of cosmological, theological, anthropological symbols of alternative orders, a biosemiotic practice to understand energy pathways in our path, in our place in them, how logic is related to the eco-emotional imagery, which in turns offers axiomatic statements along the way. And this inner voice becomes a source of wisdom and authority through time of instability, mapping the dreamscape to consider the source of disease or pneumopathology across the sleep-wake spectrum. So in terms of solving complex problems during personal, institutional, and ecological collapse, at least perceived, Toynbee suggests collapse occurs when a civilization is out of touch with its cultural creatives. And these creatives have a decision as to whether to stave off collapse by rejuvenating the old order or building and insulating the new structures from the inevitable collapse of the old order instead. So next slide, if CMA or critical medical anthropology asks us to understand the role of neoliberal fascism as it infiltrates into academic settings, neighborhood politics, as well as my own work and Dreamscape, all of our work in Dreamscapes, a few themes arise, namely the very real violences that we might take for granted, but our dreams do not and vehemently resist. Our individual needs are often not included in the already institutionalized priorities and the general indifference this is typically met with, especially in a transitional, chaotic moment where things that matter are lost or even suppressed. And finally, there's a synchronistic element, which comes off as cosmic irony of sorts, where the cosmic trickster is seemingly having fun playing with us. And so what is a problem, intractable problem, one moment may be the solution at another. So, just as an example, when the California Academy Institute of Asian Studies became the California Institute of Integral Studies during their accreditation over the protests of those who believed accreditation was a barrier to spiritual research. You see on the right an inversion of the Sri Yantra, the sacred image of the goddess, usually depicted with 9 triangles, 5 facing down to represent the female. But in this seal from 1980, that image is actually flipped upside down so that it's a majority male triangle. And 40 years later, the yantra is updated. So, on the one hand, the triangles touch, but in the upper seal, that's on the diplomas, you have the same sort of flipping. And so it came off as this male dominant triangle version of the goddess that wasn't even noticed because um, you the sacrifice that we make with spiritual research for accreditation and administrative progress. So here I'm doing my research, trying to do it unencumbered, dealing with this, what I'm considering this patriarchal neoliberal fascist institution that can't get the difference between the image of the goddess and the patriarchal inversion. Meanwhile, a week ago, one of these mundane barriers preventing this dissertation paperwork is removed, and now I can move forward. And this administrative barrier that has been affecting my dreams for over a year, that I've been exploring and hitting my head against, is poof, now gone, or maybe just invisibilized. And so we'll see how that goes. But that gets me to my conclusion in the next slide, with a nod to the cosmogenetic principles operating in nature, including our dreams as nature. Big historian Eric Chasen writes how systems capable of optimizing energy tend to survive, while those that can't do not. So I'm suggesting that dreams as nature help us to do the same. The cosmogenetic principles optimizing energy embodied in imagery, emotion, logic, and ultimately integrative action. And Thomas Berry and Brian Swim speak to dreams as the unborn felt inclination towards a new world, seeking out the quantum energy necessary to become born and embodied. And this is the sort of trademark of dreamers, being hopeful because they can see these quantum possibilities where maybe others cannot. Next slide, please. This is this idea of that within these thresholds of increasing complexity from galaxies and stars, which make new elements, which make planets, and life is emerging, and collective learning, and human brains, and human collectives. The question is whether dream exchange networks can offer a threshold of increasing complexity with emergent properties as well. A threshold we may have forgotten with the advent of the industrial shredding of the dream web over the last hundreds of or thousands of years, which is only now coming back when maybe we need it most. And finally, in the last slide, to summarize, I've tried to suggest dreams as a method and tool to diagnose causes for spiritual suffering and pathways to peace and justice. I considered the places and context where spiritual research is typically conducted as a unit for analysis to study the creeping impact of neoliberal fascism, the possibility of dream praxis as having therapeutic value to address spiritual sickness at a personal or institutional level, and also offering new infrastructures. And then finally, um, posing this question of dream exchange networks as um, pockets for creative emergence to solve the complex problems we face, with perhaps implications for how we understand energy, time, the limits of freedom, and the structure of reality that may dream itself through us. So, with that, I want to thank you all for listening and really appreciate the opportunity to share some of this stuff. So, thank you very much.